Disclaimer: this content is intended for a mature audience only. Viewer discretion is advised. The sound of rain pressed softly against the windows, a steady rhythm that filled the quiet house. The air was thick with the kind of silence that only exists between two people who know each other too well, who can feel everything the other doesn't say. She stood near the hallway light, her breath steady but her hands trembling just slightly. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something deeper, more complicated. The kind of emotion that lives somewhere between love and longing, trust and the unknown. He was close, too close, his footsteps slow, deliberate, like he was weighing each one. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. His presence alone spoke loud enough. She looked at him, her husband, and saw not just the man she'd promised her life to, but the person who still managed to disarm her with a glance. The years together hadn't dulled the pull between them. If anything, it had sharpened it, made it more dangerous. "I told him," she would later say softly, almost like she was confessing to herself, "I'm not wearing." Her voice trailed off, not in shame, not in seduction, but in a strange, unguarded honesty. A quiet rebellion wrapped in tenderness. He didn't react right away. He just looked at her, really looked, like he was searching for the truth beneath her words. Then, with a calmness that unsettled her heart, he reached out, his hand finding hers. The next moment felt suspended, the kind of moment that exists only once, before everything changes. He pulled her gently toward the closet, not out of anger, not out of desire, but with something else in his eyes, an ache, a question, a need to understand. The door closed softly behind them, the light fading to a thin, golden line across the floor. Inside that small space, surrounded by the scent of fabric and rain, time seemed to pause. Words hovered between them, unsaid, uncertain, electric. She could feel his breath near her ear, the weight of everything left unspoken. And just when she thought she knew what would happen next, he whispered her name, only her name, and everything she believed she understood about him, about them, began to shift. The space between them felt smaller than breath. The air held the scent of rain-soaked air and faint traces of her perfume, the one he'd given her years ago, when everything between them was simpler. Her back brushed against the coats hanging behind her, their quiet weight pressing the air closer still. He didn't speak. He just stood there, his eyes tracing the lines of her face like he was memorizing them for the first time all over again. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in her chest. Maybe because words always felt too fragile for moments like this. He finally whispered, "Why did you say that?" She swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. "Because I wanted to see if you'd notice me again." The truth hung there, raw and trembling. It wasn't about the statement itself, it was what it meant. The quiet ache of being unseen, even by the one who once saw everything. He looked down, his jaw tightening before he exhaled. "You think I don't?" he asked, almost to himself. "I notice every small thing you do. I just stopped knowing how to say it." Something in her softened. She remembered the boy he used to be, awkward, kind, too careful with his love. And now, the man before her, steadier, quieter, carrying the weight of years that had changed them both. Their hands brushed in the dim light. The touch was accidental at first, but neither of them pulled away. It wasn't passion, not yet. It was recognition, two people realizing they still knew the map of each other's hearts, even after losing the path for a while. The rain outside grew louder, as if echoing the rhythm of what neither dared to say. She looked up at him, eyes glassy but steady. "When did we start being afraid of each other?" He didn't answer. He just reached for her cheek, his thumb tracing the faintest line beneath her eye, the place where a tear might have fallen if she'd let it. Then came the sound of the hallway floor creaking, a reminder that the world still existed beyond that door. But for a fleeting moment, the silence between them felt like its own world, fragile and infinite. The sound of the rain softened, becoming more distant, like a heartbeat fading into memory. Inside the closet, the air had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore, but fragile, the kind of quiet that comes right before truth decides to break free. She leaned back against the wall, fingers grazing a folded shirt that smelled faintly of detergent and time. "You used to come home," she said, her voice low, almost wistful. "And I could tell how your day went just by the way you set your keys down." He smiled faintly, that quiet, broken kind of smile. "And you'd leave notes on the fridge. Little ones. You stopped doing that." "I stopped when you stopped reading them," she whispered. The silence that followed wasn't cruel, it was honest. Both of them had been living inside a love that had slowly grown quiet, each waiting for the other to make the first sound. He shifted, his hand brushing against her arm. "You think I wanted distance," he said. "I just didn't know how to be close anymore without feeling like I was losing myself." She looked up at him, eyes full of something deeper than sadness, that complicated blend of affection and ache that comes when love still exists but doesn't know where to go. "Then why pull me in?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "Because I miss you, even when I'm with you." The confession lingered, its weight settling between them. And in that fragile space, memories began to flicker, the first apartment with peeling wallpaper, the midnight drives when they couldn't afford gas but drove anyway, the promises whispered in the dark that once felt unbreakable. Now, they stood surrounded by clothes and silence, two strangers still in love, both trying to remember how to touch the same truth again. Her eyes searched his. "Do you ever wonder," she said, "what we'd be if we stopped pretending we were okay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, his gaze fell to the floor, where the sliver of light under the door painted a thin gold line across their feet, dividing them and connecting them all at once. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, like the world itself holding its breath. Inside, everything waited, for a word, a movement, a choice. The thunder rolled again, closer this time, shaking something loose inside both of them. The thin beam of light beneath the closet door flickered as the storm outside deepened, casting their shadows across the walls, two outlines that seemed to blur into one. He took a step closer, his breath unsteady, his voice almost breaking. "You think I don't see you," he said, "but I do. Every day. Even when I'm quiet. Especially when I'm quiet." Her pulse quickened. "Then why does it feel like you're always somewhere else?" "Because I don't know how to reach you anymore," he said. "You become a memory I can't stop chasing." The words cut through the air, sharp and tender all at once. She wanted to reach for him, to bridge the distance that had stretched between them over years of routine, of silence disguised as peace. But something inside her still hesitated, afraid of touching what might break again. "I'm right here," she said softly, the ache in her voice trembling like the storm outside. "I've been here, waiting for you to remember who we were before everything got quiet." He looked at her then, really looked, and something inside him cracked. All the restraint, all the composure he'd been holding on to seemed to falter. His hand moved to her face, not in command but in confession, his touch trembling with every word he didn't know how to say. "I remember," he whispered. "I just didn't think you still wanted that version of me." Her eyes glistened. "I want the version that still feels something when he looks at me." Lightning flashed through the small line under the door, painting their faces in fleeting white. For a heartbeat, they stood frozen, two souls caught between holding on and letting go. The rain began again, harder now, and the sound wrapped around them like a pulse. He leaned in just enough for her to feel his breath against her temple, close, but not crossing the fragile line between them. Everything inside the room was charged, not with passion, but with the weight of every word left unsaid. The air felt alive, trembling with all the things neither could yet admit. Then, just as he opened his mouth to speak, a sound came from the other side of the door, a soft knock. The moment shattered like glass, their eyes meeting in stunned silence. The knock on the door was soft, hesitant, but it shattered everything. They both froze, hearts thundering louder than the storm outside. For a moment, neither of them moved, caught between the past that held them and the present pressing in from the other side of the door. He exhaled slowly. "Did you expect someone?" She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No. Not tonight." The knock came again, gentler this time, followed by a faint voice, familiar, yet distant. "Are you okay in there?" It was his younger sister. The one who had moved in after her breakup, the one who'd been pretending not to notice the quiet tension between them for weeks. He closed his eyes, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The moment, their fragile, suspended world, began to crumble. She reached for his arm, her fingers trembling, not from fear but from the weight of what might spill out if they opened that door. "Don't," she said softly. "Not yet." Her voice carried something deeper than urgency, it carried truth. That maybe this moment, this strange cocoon of silence and confession, was the first honest thing they'd shared in years. He looked at her then, searching her face. "We can't keep doing this," he said. "Doing what?" "Pretending that love alone fixes what's broken." Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with a kind of defiance, the quiet, human kind that comes when you realize you're fighting for something already halfway gone. "And what if it doesn't fix it?" she asked. "What if it just reminds us what it used to feel like?" For a second, the words hung between them, glowing like embers. Then she stepped closer, so close he could feel the warmth of her breath, her heartbeat steady but aching. "This," she whispered, "whatever this is tonight, it's not about pretending. It's about remembering we still exist." Outside, the storm shifted, a sudden gust rattling the window panes. The knock came once more, then faded away, leaving only the sound of rain and their own breathing. He reached for the door handle but stopped, fingers hovering in the dim light. When he looked back at her, something new flickered in his eyes, a mix of fear and wanting, of love fighting to be reborn or finally let go. The sound of the rain began to soften, easing from thunder to a quiet hum, as if even the sky had grown tired of holding its breath. He still stood with his hand on the closet door, torn between the life waiting outside and the heartbeat echoing inside. She watched him, calm, composed, but with eyes that told the story of 1,000 unsaid words. "Open it," she said finally, her tone steady but low. "Whatever happens next shouldn't stay hidden." He hesitated, then turned the handle. The light from the hallway spilled in, warm and human, cutting through the half-dark. His sister was gone, only a shadow of her footsteps remained. But somehow, that open door changed everything. They both stepped out. The living room felt different now, filled with a kind of quiet clarity. The storm outside had become gentle, tapping softly at the windows. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap. He joined her, leaving space between them, a space that wasn't empty, but alive with all they'd been avoiding. "I didn't pull you into that closet because of what you said," he began, his voice rough around the edges. "I pulled you in because I was scared I'd already lost you." She looked up, her eyes glimmering. "You hadn't," she said. "You just stopped reaching." The truth landed like a whisper and an earthquake at once. They both knew it, love wasn't something you lost all at once. It faded, quietly, in the spaces between too much pride and too little time. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "Do you think we can start over?" Her answer came slow, deliberate. "We can't start over. But maybe we can begin from where we finally told the truth." Silence followed, not heavy, but full. Then she reached out, her hand resting on his. Not to claim, not to promise, just to stay. He turned his hand over, fingers intertwining with hers. For the first time in a long while, the air between them felt light. Outside, the storm stopped completely. The house exhaled. And as the night settled, they both realized, love wasn't about never breaking. It was about choosing, again and again, to rebuild. The morning came slow, gentle streaks of light creeping through the curtains, painting soft gold on their faces. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stillness that felt earned. The world outside smelled of wet earth and quiet beginnings. She sat by the window, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders, watching droplets race down the glass. Behind her, he brewed coffee, the sound of the kettle, the faint clink of a spoon, small, ordinary things that suddenly felt sacred. No words filled the space at first. They didn't need them. Everything that could have been said had been spoken in glances, in silences, in the trembling honesty of the night before. When he finally handed her a cup, their fingers brushed. It wasn't a spark this time, it was warmth, steady and calm. "I didn't sleep much," he admitted. "Neither did I," she said softly. "But it feels lighter somehow." He sat across from her, his expression open, unguarded. "I kept thinking," he said, "maybe we weren't falling out of love. Maybe we were just forgetting how to look at each other." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time we start looking again." Outside, a few birds returned, their faint songs threading through the morning air. The house, once heavy with unspoken things, felt alive again, as though it too was learning to breathe. There were no grand declarations, no sweeping apologies. Just two people rediscovering the quiet miracle of staying. He reached for her hand again, and she didn't hesitate. The past wasn't gone, but it no longer anchored them. It simply existed, proof that even love with cracks can hold. As sunlight pooled across the floor, she looked at him and whispered, "You know what's strange?" "What?" "Last night, I thought we were breaking. But maybe, we were finally bending enough not to." He smiled then, not the practiced kind, but the one she hadn't seen in years, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt real again. Sometimes love doesn't begin with a spark, it begins again in the quiet after the storm.